What happens with the world when the US crashes? What will happen if the US economy collapses? How bad would it be? What would be the effects on the world? And what would happen in your own country? Are you prepared to face this kind of situation? These are questions that nobody wants to think about, and unfortunately, they are not going away anytime soon. With all this uncertainty, you must educate yourself and your family on how to survive these difficult times, to continue living as normally as possible and avoid the impending chaos of what could happen if these events occur. However, why should US citizens care about the state of their country's economy? For starters, affection for their financial health, but that's hardly the whole story. The truth is, when the United States enters a recession, businesses and financial markets around the world take notice, and they don't react well to what they see. And as bad as things get in America during a recession, the rest of the world usually suffers more. In addition, the US economy makes up more than 25% of the global economy, and it's been growing at a snail's pace since 2008. Now, if you combine this with the US debt reaching $20 trillion, the inevitable crash seems like a foregone conclusion. So what happens when the world's leading economic superpower crashes? No one knows, because no one has ever thought about that before. Hey there people, and welcome back to Econify. If you're just joining us, you can hit like on all our videos and click subscribe to get amazing content. Today, we'll look at what happens when a major superpower like the US crashes and how it affects economies around the world. Don't forget the comment section on this video and be sure to watch it all the way. Alright, let's go. Since the Great Recession of 2008, the United States has been stuck in a financial crisis, and its high debt-to-GDP ratio has become an intractable problem. Given the current climate of unpredictability, many are curious about the global impact of a sudden US bankruptcy and failure to pay its debts. Here is what might happen if it were to happen tomorrow. Investors will dump their shares. When traders hear about a potential crash, they want to sell their stocks before it's too late. If the market crashes, investors dump their shares by selling them off at any price possible to ensure they don't lose money. Now that's a smart thing to do. This will cause a domino effect where other investors will start dumping their shares to avoid losing money. The result is a stock market crash, leading to long-term consequences for major economies such as China and the UK. If people are worried about the future of these countries because of what's happening with their stock markets, this could affect how much they buy from each other. For example, if the Chinese stop buying products from American companies because of fear that America might soon go bankrupt, then there won't be enough demand on American products overseas, and this could eventually have an impact on American exports. However, you should know, if you're living in one country but investing in another, your assets are subject to both countries' laws. So if the US suddenly declares bankruptcy while you're investing somewhere, say Europe for example, you might not be exempted from paying back what you owe, just because your physical address says something different. What happens with the world economy when the US crashes? The global economy will suffer as a result of the collapse of the US economy. As I mentioned before, a crash would have far-reaching effects on many aspects of our society, not the least of which is the stock market. Imports and exports costs would rise as a result of a declining currency. When the United States imports more from China, for instance, the trade deficit with China grows. We would also see exponential increase in inflation because we are buying more goods and fewer people are working, so there is less demands for goods and services. More money in economy leads to higher prices. Less investments means less building, which leads to higher unemployment rates as well as lower production rates at factories. Countries like Canada, which relies heavily on natural resources, would foremost feel the effects of this, since its export-driven economy depends on demand from countries like the US. What's more, developing nations may suffer if the US reduce foreign aid and make their citizens pay for expensive debt restructuring programs. Europe might go into a recession because some European banks are large holders of the US dollars and might be unable to repay their loans. Many emerging markets could see their currencies devalued. Global trade could shrink considerably if all these things happen at once or in stages. Yeah, it is important to remember that although some parts of the global economy could fare better than others during a crash, such as those that produce raw materials and commodities, every nation's well-being will still suffer tremendously in the long term. Everyone will have to wait long lines at banks. When a country such as the United States crashes, all its banks will be closed, and people will have to wait in long lines to get their money. The first problem is that not everyone has enough cash on hand to last them for an extended period, and most people rely on electronic transactions or debit cards, which are no good if there is no power or internet services. This means that people will panic and rush to the banks, causing even more chaos. However, the larger problems may not be solved by these measures. Food supplies could become limited as transportation is disrupted because trucks may either stop running because they can't afford diesel, or out of fear, they'll also crash as planes did. The value of the dollar will plummet. The dollar value reflects how much faith people have in the United States. If people lose faith, they will look for other places to invest their money, and the American currency will be worthless. A weaker dollar would affect imports because they would be more expensive, pushing prices for everything from food to clothes. Weaker currencies make exports cheaper, so countries like China can thrive. But with the trade war with China and other economic crises, America is likely to fall into a recession, and this time it could be worse than that in 2008. The US economy relies on having a strong dollar, so if it became weak again, then there could be mass layoffs and wage cuts from everyone across the board. It also means that international partners won't want to do business with the Americans either, so things will look pretty grim pretty quickly. There won't be enough deposits to offset the losses, thus the banks will have to close. If businesses don't have enough money after laying off workers, they may not be able to pay their supplies, making it difficult for those who still have jobs to buy basic essentials like food. As a result, those who are financially secure may choose to hoard their resources in anticipation of a future improvement in the state of affairs. What's more, the inability to produce goods and services could lead to a breakdown in global supply chains. The result is that we are likely to see significant increase in poverty worldwide. Governments may not have the resources they need to keep up with demand, while markets fail without imports from countries outside America. Unemployment rates will be high as many companies across industries close, not only in the US though, and people will lose their jobs. This also means there will be fewer goods and services produced, which could lead to an economic depression, like what many folks witnessed in 2008. The lack of production would also lead to decrease in tax revenue, which would make it harder for governments to provide basic services like healthcare and education. A shortage of oil might happen if transportation systems can't keep up or if prices rise significantly. Due to a lack of access of credit and investment capital, lack of clean water or food might become a problem too. And since everything is interconnected today, any issues that arise in one country quickly spread globally. That's why experts say these problems aren't just affecting Americans, they're affecting us all. The crash in the United States will have many impacts on other countries. Specifically, it will cause a lot of international trade to be disrupted. Countries like China and Mexico that sell large amounts of goods to America will lose a significant part of their business. This disruption in the trade may result in these countries being unable to pay off their debts, which could lead to an economic collapse in these nations. In turn, this would cause people in those countries to take more drastic measures as they try to get food and necessities for themselves and their families. And if those things happen, it is hard to say what might happen next. We hope you've liked this video. If you would like to receive more like it, subscribe to Econify and enable notifications. Waiting for you in the next video.